Hello and welcome to Menu Talk with Pat and Bret. I am your co-host, Bret Thorn, Senior Food and Beverage Editor of Nation's Restaurant News and Restaurant Hospitality.
And I'm Pat Cobe, Senior Menu Editor at Restaurant Business. Welcome.
How you doing, Pat?
Okay. How are you doing?
I'm also doing okay. I'm wearing a festive shirt.
Yes, you are.
The weather has turned in New York City, and it's summery now. And Pride Month just started, so, I'm proud. I'll wear a multicolored shirt. It's not quite a rainbow, but it has.
It's lots of good colors. Much more interesting than what I'm wearing, for sure.
You're wearing a very nice sweater.
Well, I am getting into summer mode, though, for sure. It is really getting warmer finally and nice and sunny out, so we're lucky.
Yeah. I went to a Yankees game last night with some colleagues.
Nice.
Beers there are like $17, which is...
Seriously? Wow.
Yes. So, but I had some anyway.
Did you have are there any new food kiosks?
I actually didn't eat. I think it's the first time I've been to a baseball game and not eaten. But I don't know. I just wanted my beer and I sat there and I'm sure there's new stuff. I mean, it's a dining experience. Stadiums all over the country. There's a lot going on and why not?
For sure. So what's happening on menus this week? Well,
the big news is in what people like to call the chicken wars. I'm sure I've said this before. I hate calling them chicken wars. You're selling chicken. Nobody's dying except the chicken. Like, it's not a war. It's a competition for market share, sure. But that's like, war is serious, and selling chicken wraps, which is what's happening now, is not that serious. So McDonald's has been teasing that they were going to come out with bring back their snack wraps for quite a while. And they introduced their McCrispy chicken strips, I think they're called, allowing them, therefore, to wrap them up in something. And then you have a snack wrap. And then Popeyes, out of nowhere, said, oh, yeah, we're going to do snack wraps, too. And so now there are extra snack wraps. Then there's some new chicken items from smaller chains. Roy Rogers has a fried chicken thing, and so does the Green Turtle and Hawaiian Bros. So it's chicken all the time. Starbird, the chicken chain out of the Bay Area, has some new salads with fried chicken on top. That's just sort of their thing.
Well, I interviewed a chef from Miller's All Day, which is just a 2-location all-day restaurant in the Charleston area. And they're doing this really interesting chicken and waffle salad because they had leftover waffles from breakfast and they didn't want them to go to waste. So they cut them up and made them into croutons and put them in the salad. I thought it was a really cool idea.
That is smart.
Yeah.
My mother did something like that and it was terrible. And it was the last time we allowed her to make meatloaf. She put leftover waffles into the meatloaf, which honestly isn't, if she were to grind it up into breadcrumbs or something, sure. But she just put chunks of waffle in there, kind of sticking out.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Well, these are croutons, so they're not ground up, but he deep fries them. So how could they be bad?
Right. And a fried crouton is nice.
Yeah.
Not exactly. And it's probably fried chicken in the...
Fried chicken, tenders, and then they do some kind of like a hickory syrup that has some truffle in it. So, it's a nice combination of ingredients.
Yeah, that sounds great. As long as you don't think that by serving it on top of lettuce, that it's some sort of diet option.
Definitely not.
Weight loss sort of thing. I mean, it's good for you and that it makes you happy. And happiness is important, so I'm not going to...
Well, speaking of dieting, we've seen a lot of cookies this week.
Yeah, yes, speaking of dieting, Jimmy John's, right, has a new cookie, a lemon sunshine cookie, and then Chip City cookies and Great American Cookies have new cookies.
Yeah, Chip City's is an espresso takeoff.
Which is kind of fun.
Yeah, but it's only available for like a couple of days. I don't know,
Oh, yeah, it's just this weekend.
Right.
So by the time this podcast airs, you won't be able to get it, and you're out of luck. But Great American Cookies,
good idea. I think they should keep it on. It sounds good.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why they decided to only do it for a couple of days. And Great American Cookies has two cookies, and they're chocolate chip cookies wrapped around other cookies. One is wrapped around two Reese's peanut butter cups, and the other is wrapped around an Oreo cookie. So that's fun.
And then we were looking at IHOP's Pancake of the Month, which also is related to cookies because the
Yes.
flavor is cookie butter. And it's, filled with cookie pieces and covered with Biscoff cookie butter. So that sounds very cookie centric for sure.
Very, very cookie-ish. And speaking of baked desserts, I got kind of a dumb email from a retail brownie company, and we don't really cover retail anyway, but they were saying that brownies were supplanting ice cream this summer, which is simply false. Like you can't just make things up. And well, I guess I just now am spreading this rumor too, but saying it is false. There's no way that I mean, brownies are great. They're different from ice cream, and ice cream is the dominant dessert of the summer. Always will be.
Definitely, yeah.
Although remember last year it was all about the creamsicle, and
Mhm.
we're seeing less of that this year. Not as much
Right,
orange and vanilla combinations.
right. Yeah, there are different combinations. I know that Baskin Robbins came out with their flavor of the month too. It's called Trolley. So it has Trolley Sour Bright Crawlers, which are candies, those sour candies. And I think most of these flavors, like the cookies and the ice creams, are appealing to Gen Z's nostalgia because these are what they ate growing up.
Well, it makes sense. Well, and if you put uh Reese's peanut butter cups or Oreo cookies in something, that's nostalgic for me
Yeah,
and probably for them.
it's yeah, there are different nostalgia, you know, I guess points for each generation. But I remember my kids eating a lot of those trolley, the gummy candies and the sour belts and all those sour gummies that they ate growing up. And although they're millennials and not Gen Z, I mean, I guess it triggers something for them too.
Well, and obviously the generation cohorts are broad generalizations. I mean, when any generation sort of comes of age at about 21 or 22, people start defining them and, saying, you want work-life balance. And, they're not just about making money. At least, yeah, that's true of all 22-year-olds, except for, the
True.
serious finance wonk. So I don't know that it's so much of a generational thing as that everybody's like that when they're 22.
Well, I
Right?
know you and Heather talked a lot about CBD beverages too. That's
Yes.
another thing that Gen Z is really into.
Yes. Cannabis in general.
Hmm.
And also more Hispanic flavors, like Starbucks just came out with an iced horchata oat milk shaken espresso. And the horchata syrup, it has flavors of cinnamon, vanilla, and rice. So that's fun. Maybe I'll swing by and try that,
Yeah,
as well
definitely.
as some berry refreshers and stuff. Lots of berries. It's summertime.
Hmm. Anyway, we did an interview this week with Bret Lunsford, who is the chef and culinary director at Sally's Pizza. And Sally's is a pizza concept that originated in Connecticut and does Connecticut style pizza, which is made in a coal fired oven so that the crust gets really blistered on the bottom. And that's the signature part of the pizza. And they are expanding beyond Connecticut. In fact, this week I was reading a New York Times article which talked about how Connecticut is trying to compete with New York for the best pizza because they're putting up billboards in like areas where there are, renowned New York pizza places and trying to get people to think that Connecticut pizza is the next big thing. But the way Bret describes it, they're doing some really interesting things, and he's really expanded the menu to include salads, appetizers, and more unique pizzas than they started out with, which was way back in 1938 that they started. So it's kind of interesting to hear how they've evolved.
That's probably why it's called a pizza, and it's spelled Apizza, right?
Right.
Because the term pizza hadn't really solidified, and obviously Italy has a lot of different dialects, and so people say things differently.
Right.
So that's fun. I think the uh Connecticut, the push of for Connecticut to be like, we have pizza too, is, I mean, it's something we've seen with Detroit style pizza. And, Chicagoans are very proud of they have many different types of pizza. They have stuffed crust
Hmm.
pizza, they have deep dish pizza, and which are, probably more famous. But what most Chicagoans eat, as I understand it, are tavern pizzas, which are also thin and crispy and, easy to eat. So, I mean, and Connecticut pizzas also have quite thin crusts.
Yeah,
So,
well, they do the white clam pizza. That's kind of what they're known for. But they also have lots of other varieties, and they don't use a lot of cheese. It's mostly they put this tomato, like a homemade tomato puree, on top, and then just a little bit of cheese. So New York pizza is more about the cheese
yes,
for sure.
I might. So now I want to get a shaken or chata espresso, and I want to walk. I don't know, less than 1,000 yards from me is a perfectly acceptable Brooklyn slice shop. I could go.
Hmm. Well, I think you should do that for lunch for sure.
Yes, and enjoy it while listening to your interview.
Hi there. I'm Pat Cobe, Senior Menu Editor at Restaurant Business, and I'm here with Bret Lunsford, who's the Executive Chef and Culinary Director at Sally's Beats. I hope I said that right, Bret.
Very, very close. All beats. Yeah, all beats, but very, very close. It's good. But one of the best first swings I've ever heard at it. So far,
Oh, well,
knocking out the
thanks.
park.
So tell me a little bit about Sally's and what makes it different from other pizza concepts.
Sure. Yeah. So Sally's started in New Haven, Connecticut in 1938 by Salvatore Consiglio. That's Sally. Him and his brother worked at another pizzeria down the street for his uncle, and that ended sourly. So the stories go, and so his their mama sold about $500 worth of jewelry, and then bought a bakery right down the road, and they opened up their own pizzeria, and they called it Sally's. And so we've been open since 1938. Still doing it in the same traditions, the way we were taught. The dough made the same, patted out the same way, the sauce, everything as recipes as close as we can get to the original, keeping that tradition alive. And I think that's one of the most special parts about what we do is that, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so we're keeping the most important aspects we can there, to keeping those traditions and making sure that product is consistent across all of our stores. Our sauce forward, light on the moots, and our coal fired ovens that give us that signature char. So you have this nice thin dough, nice crunchy, crispy leopard spots on the bottom, uniquely cut that is synonymous with New Haven style of beats cutting and like almost random styles. But ours is not so random anymore, but nice long thin strips of pizza, which is a little different than a larger foldable New York slice.
Mm-hmm.
And tradition, caring, taking the time. Some ways, the easier way is not always the best way. Sometimes if it takes a little bit more, it's worth it at the end. And I think that, people who come in and try some of our beats would say the same.
When did you actually join Sally's?
Yeah, so I just finished my 2-year mark with Sally's, actually. So I'm pretty fresh into it. Yeah, I came on and kind of hit the ground running and got to adapt the menu a little bit and bring it kind of, while again staying true to traditions, bring it more into the 21st century and kind of what guests are looking for. They love our beats, but they're looking for more, and so we're happy to provide that to them.
And what was the culinary journey that brought you to Sally's?
Man, oh well, I've been cooking most of my life. I'm born and raised in the South. I was Atlanta for like 6 weeks, Texas for most of my life, by way of New Orleans, which is where my mama was born and raised. My granny and godmother lived there, so I spent a lot of time cooking with my granny when I was in New Orleans, making gumbo and red beans and rice and all the the classic New Orleans dishes that were. And my mom's side, they're the Tarantino, so a lot of red sauce, or as my mama would say, red gravy. People in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
Making meatballs, lasagna, the standard Italian American repertoire with her, with that New Orleans twist as it is. And then my dad, born and raised Texan, so a lot of grilling in the backyard, smoking, barbecue, things like that. I worked at, the standard restaurants that Mississippi, which is where I did junior high, high school, and college at. had to offer. So I started like a Sonic drive-in. I'd work at my stepdad's restaurant in New Orleans and worked for Sonic for a while, like I said, but Outback Steakhouse actually for about 8 years, cooking, doing front of house, back of house. I've always had this itch to serve and to provide hospitality, and cooking in the kitchen really drew me. I worked at Disney World for a little bit and cooked at Hollywood Studios drive-in theater, which is very fun. If you've ever gotten to have the chance to eat there, it's right by Star Wars. And then after that, I wanted to really make it a true profession. So I went to the Culinary Institute of America in 2011 in Hyde Park, New York, and I graduated in 2013. I moved down to New York City and I joined Union Square Hospitality Group, where I worked for a little bit over 10 years. I worked at Gramercy Tavern with Mike Anthony for about 3 years, opened up Untitled in the Meatpacking District at the Whitney American Museum. Then I actually dug back into my Southern roots again and joined Blue Smoke. And so I worked for Blue Smoke for about 8 years. And that's where I left as the executive chef. And then I joined Sally's in 2000. And I guess what year is it now? 23 is when I did it. So yeah, I just rounded it out.
Wow, that's quite a journey. I'm really impressed.
Yeah, I checked all the boxes of like fast food, like quick service, fine dining, Michelin, family restaurants. Pretty well rounded overall, which I feel very fortunate to been able to do.
So you mentioned that you have to, respect some of the traditions of Sally's, but actually evolve the menu as well. So since you've arrived, how have you expanded the menu?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Ray. Yeah. So tradition again is like one of the most important parts of what we do. We have like diehard fans. People will come across the country to wait in a line on Worcester Street in New Haven to get Sally's. And so, I almost look at the New Haven location as a museum, as way as like, this is what it needs. It should be preserved in time. It's such a beautiful space with, so many families, like grandparents and parents and grandkids and they've all come through there and they have this really deep connection to that restaurant. So I don't want to mess with that too much. What I did is expanded the menu in ways of adding on the other things that people were looking for, things like salads and appetizers, entrees, desserts, things like that. We brought on some sandwiches using the same dough that we use for our beets. We now fold it in a way and make panwozzi out of it, which is almost like an Italian pita. And so you can do different things with that. Arancini, meatballs, Italian wings, different salads like wedges, Caesars, chicken francese, chicken parm, obviously. How can you be an Italian-American restaurant and not serve chicken parm?
Right.
Cannoli pies, tiramisu, again, just things that people were raising their hands saying that, we want some more from Sally's. And, I'm blessed enough to be able to provide it.
And you also added some of your own pizzas. So some of those might even be outperforming some of the originals. So
yeah, right. So So not only, I definitely have elevated or working on it with the team of our beats game a little bit. Again, everything. The pizza as it is such a beautiful canvas to use. It's a dough that's perfected in my opinion. So I don't need to touch that at all. The ratio of how things are sauced or how things are placed in the pie is already there. So I just get to kind of like, these are the notes in the scale that I was given on a piece of music. And I just got to add little accents here and there and do new things. So we put on some other things. Like one of my favorites is the Calabrian Stinger, which is like a pie that is just like kind of like, if I wanted a pie, what would I want? So it's like spicy, sweet. There's andouille, sausage on there, and spicy salami, red onions, peppers, Calabrian hot honey, pecorino. And then the basil burrata is another really, really big one as well. So it's a sauce pie is how it starts, which is the original beets made on Worcester Street. So just dough in our sauce, a little bit of parm, and then it comes out and we finish it with some broken burrata, so stracciatella, and then some basil oil and fresh basil leaves. So just really trying to pay attention to, the freshness of what Italian cuisine really is. With Italian cuisine, that's really at its core is like, if you could take things that are in season, things that are done well, and just put those together and do it as simply as possible, and just take a little bit of time and love into that, like you'll get a really, really great product at the end of the day.
And so how does, I'm familiar with Pepe's because that's the only New Haven style pizza I've had.
Sure.
But I used to live in Westchester, so there was one in Yonkers.
Perfect. Yeah.
Is Sally's similar to Pepe's, or how do
Yeah.
they?
So I kind of alluded to it earlier by saying that the pizzeria down the street. So Frank Pepe is actually Sal's uncle. Him and his brother Tony worked for him for probably 5 or so years, family business altogether. And then they had Tony, as the story goes, had a falling out, and so that's when he was fired. And so Sally was a good brother and went with his brother, and then they did their own thing after that. So it's very close and similar. The way they do their moots on the pie is a little different than the way we do ours. The way they sauce is slightly different. Their bake is a little different. Ingredients are definitely different. They're each wonderful in their own ways. I'm a little biased, obviously, and I would prefer Sally's every day of the week. But there are those who prefer Pepe's, and that's perfectly fine. We all can't be perfect. But they're both great pies, and we like to say a rising tide lifts all ships. What's good for Pepe's is good for Sally, is good for Modern, good for the people of New Haven, and good for the pizza community in general.
Speaking of the pizza community, what do you think customers are looking for in pizza these days? And, as a menu category or as a restaurant category?
Yeah. So pizza in general in the last, I'd say probably 5 years have really taken off. Dave Portnoy, love him or hate him, he's a little polarizing for sure. He started doing the Barstool pizza reviews and the One Bite, as people know it as. And that really kind of brought pizza more on the map again. Everyone started becoming an expert all of a sudden and thinking wanting to try these pies. And with that, I think people they're looking for more. They're looking for that seasonality, that freshness. They're happy to try the original style slices, your regular slice, your cheese, your pepperoni, that type of thing. But they also want to be surprised. They also want to know sometimes where their products are coming from. They want to know that you're taking care of that product and that you have their best interest, in all, checking all boxes across the board there.
And how many locations does Sally's have now?
We currently have 6. Our last one we opened was in Farmington, Connecticut. And we're about to open, we plan right now to open 3 to 4 more this year. And then the goal is at least 4 more every year for the next, foreseeing future.
Will they mostly be in the Northeast then? I mean, are you focusing in that?
Primarily in the Northeast, for sure. We are always looking and happy to entertain all sorts of ideas. At the end of the day, what's most important to us, though, is keeping consistency and making sure no matter where you have Sally's, that it is as close to, if not, maybe even better than what you'll get on Worcester Street as well.
Right. So they'll all have coal-fired ovens.
Absolutely. That's that we can. Yeah, that's one of our sacred cows, as it is. It's the way that our dough, our sauce, our moots, the way we cook the pies, the way that every step of that process has got to be the same in the same respect.
So I lived in Chicago for a while, and I'm just curious about what you think about Chicago-style pizzas. I mean, there are several different. Everyone thinks deep dish, but there's also
the tavern style pie. Yeah. I think people are allowed to like things, I've been asked questions like this before, and I don't think you're trying to do this, but I think sometimes people want me to be like, Chicago pies are trash and, New York is, and I think people are, everyone has their own style, and that's what makes pizza so exciting, is that it's a little bit different no matter where you go. And I think that, culture in different cities having their own identity is so important. And so getting to go to Chicago, which I've now gotten to go to a couple of times, and having either a deep dish slice or, a more tavern style, they're solid, they're good stuff. There's a lot, and especially in New York, when I was in New York, I ate over 100 different slice shops. And
really, wow.
Yeah, I went pretty crazy for a while. And there's great pizza and then there's bad pizza. So, at the end of the day, it's all about perspective, I think.
So how much can you change the pizza? I mean, how much can you, evolve the pizza as far as the sauce or the crust or the
sauce and the dough and the way we top the pies? I don't want to change or evolve, because I do think that is, something that was instilled from us in the beginning. And you're not special anymore if what made you special is changed. So I think you have to really stay true to your beginnings and what made you who you are. From that, though, I do think like it's okay to rethink things, to try new ingredients, to use some technique in some it's like ways that were created later that maybe weren't available back then. Because who's to say that if Sal knew of a way to make basil oil or like garlic chips or something like that, he wouldn't have done that. Maybe he would have loved it, but he used what he had and did it in his way. And I think it's okay for things to evolve if it's for the better, as long as, especially like if you're using the respect of and traditions of something that's been around as long as Sally's has. I think that's more my guiding light. I tried to have fun with the pies and create things that are not that you really just have to come to Sally's to get and to try. I don't know if some pies I've seen have gone a little off the wall, and I think that they kind of do it for the Instagram of it all, or just to be fun and like at the end. I literally have a tattoo that says it's got to taste good, and so at the end of the day, that's what's most important to me.
For sure. And as far as, during the pandemic, I mean, pizza delivery became a huge thing. Are people still getting pizzas delivered as often, or do you try and focus on the dining in experience?
Yeah, dining in is always going to be what I'm more passionate about, because there's nothing better than it coming straight from this coal-fired oven onto a sheet tray, sliced and brought to your table. That's the way that it's meant to be eaten, truly. It does travel pretty well. Pizza boxes, for all of their faults, it really is the worst way to honestly like deliver a pie, but it's like the only way. It's very hard. The second you put in that cardboard, it starts steaming. And so
Right.
The community has been looking for ways. And so if anyone has an idea, please make it happen. But I'm always be pushing for indoor dining, not only because of the way the food should be eaten, but also that's where we get to provide the hospitality. That's where you get to try our cocktails, and our wine program and our beers. We've paired with Two Roads Brewery, and they have made what we call Sally's a Pils, which is a Pilsner beer that is specially crafted. We've worked with their brewmasters and had it curated specifically to go with our charred crust.
Cool.
Yeah.
And what are the wines like?
They're pretty. We actually have our blend made. It's imported from Italy, so we have a red and a white blend. Those are our standard house bottles.
Mm-hmm.
They're pretty patio poundable for sure. I would definitely take a bottle to the face pretty easily. But our cocktails are classic inspired, but also forward thinking as well. We're inspired by a lot of the bars in the larger cities, trying things around New York and Chicago and other areas, and using that and bringing it in. There's a lot of people in Sally's who have fine dining backgrounds and have worked in larger hospitality groups. And our goal is to take all of our experience and bring it together and bring it in a setting that would surprise you, that you don't expect coming to like your like neighborhood pizzeria and having the level of hospitality that we want to provide to you.
Right. And how else does your fine dining background come into play? I mean, you mentioned a couple of ways, but how about, you said you had some barbecue experience.
Sure.
Is there anything you're like, any barbecue flavors you're
There's, yeah, I actually got to do a fun collaboration. There's a wonderful barbecue restaurant called Hoodoo Brown in Ridgefield, Connecticut. And those guys I knew for years when I was in the barbecue scene. And we did for a couple of years a Kentucky Derby party at our Stanford location. And we got to make, using their brisket and using barbecue sauce and, caramelizing onions and trying different cheeses and like really like getting fun with it and making a special pie. Different things like oils and, dehydrating or, fresh herbs, things like that. Those are some just like in care of ingredients, I think overall is some of the techniques that we like to pull and bring forward.
You covered pretty much what I wanted to hear. Is there anything else you want to add about Sally's or what's next for Bret? Or
I'm just happy. I'm a happy little clam still working at Sally's, and I'm excited about our projection where we're going. There's a lot of exciting things coming down the menu that are non-pizza items that I'm not really at liberty to talk about right now, but very excited. I think we're going to be moving into other areas still in the Northeast, but possibly other locations as well. And so I'm just excited to see the trajectory of our company and continue to move forward while using our past as a guiding light.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of Menu Talk. Like and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Pat Cobe.
And I'm Bret Thorn.
See you next week.